Okay, so welcome back to another episode of Low Spec Labs. It brings me joy and excitement to bring this video to you. Can you feel the joy and excitement on my face? You can't? That's okay. People have told me before that I am a hard read. I don't get why. Because I'm oftentimes very literal of what I am saying. Unless, of course, I'm being sarcastic. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about this. This is you. You went online and you saw a YouTube video talking about Proxmox and you got interested. You didn't know what it was, but you learned you could install it on one of your many old computers. And that started an obsession with Linux. Or this is not you, and you know exactly what Proxmox is, in which case this video will be helpful to you. Regardless, at some point you got a bunch of Proxmox nodes spun up, and at some point you realized that managing the logs across them and across their guests was becoming a very tedious process. A pain in your ass. Don't worry. I'm here to help alleviate that pain in your ass. And how does one alleviate one's pain? Through automation, of course. So let's go ahead and let's get started here. We have Proxmox, and we have a Proxmox cluster. I actually have 3 nodes conveniently called PVE test. I wonder who named them. So we're going to use these test nodes to test out Proxmox. We're going to use these test nodes to test out spinning up an rsyslog server and then automating the process of getting all of our servers talking to the rsyslog server. So in order to do that, we're going to need 3 nodes. We're going to start here on this node. We're going to go to local, and we're going to download a template. We're going to go to local, and then we're going to download a template. And the template in this case is Debian. Now you could also use a virtual machine for this, but I like to use containers because they are technically lighter weight, less resource intensive, and pretty easy to spin up. You'll notice I already kind of have a template here, but we're going to pretend like this one doesn't exist for educational purposes. So we've downloaded our template. We'll come back to our virtualization guest, and then we're going to call this 101, and we're going to call this Debian template. So we're going to base all our other guests off of this. You'll see why I like templates so much as we continue this video. We're going to store this locally for faster spin up. Going to give this 16 gigs of storage. Store it on our local. Give this 1 CPU, or rather 1 core or 1 thread. 512. We're not going to need much more. We want to get its IP via DHCP. And the domain is going to be, and then I pointed to my internal DNS server, but you could also point this to like Google or Cloudflare or whatever, right? That was the wrong domain. That's my internal domain, not my, that was my internal domain, not necessarily my test domain, but that's fine for testing purposes. So we have Debian template spun up here. Let's go back to the console. Let's wait. What is it doing here? Come on, baby. There we go. Okay. So we've got our template spun up. And generally when I spin up a first Debian template, the first thing I do is get an update. We'll let that run. Then we do an upgrade, which is different. An update just updates the repositories. An upgrade actually pulls the packages and makes the changes. So we'll let that run, right? And you'll see why I like Proxmox, because a lot of times I want to test something out, but I don't necessarily want to put in all the extra time and energy it often takes to spin up a full fat VM, right? Sometimes, if you're going to be running a lot of different Docker containers, it's easier just to have a template with Docker already rolled into it, and then you just clone that and go about your day. It's like 2-3 minutes, right? So it's setting up its stuff. Something you should notice is that it installed SSH server, because I want this thing to be easy to manage. And you also want to go on here and change the SSH server. And you'll notice I'm doing a couple of things. I enable permit root login. I enable pub key authentication. I enable the authorized keys files. And then I enable password authentication. Yes, this is just for easier management. And again, just installing some simple repositories. This is just some basic tools that I find myself using a lot of times when installing stuff. So if you're making a template like we're doing in this video, you want to make sure that the template actually has the tools you'll need going forward. And those are just some common tools that I find myself using across different Debian VMs, right? Sometimes you hop into a VM, you download a package, and then it doesn't have tar installed, and you're like, mother. So you just keep it rolling, right? So what we have here is our Debian template spun up. It's been updated, it's been upgraded, it has its tools installed. And then what we want to do is we want to use this as the basis for the rest of our VMs. So we're going to shut this one down. Then we're going to do a full clone. Let's refresh here, right? And this time we're going to clone it to the same source, local LVM. And we're going to call this one rsyslog. And we'll let that one fully clone away. And just take about a minute or two. All right. So we're going to do one more template clone. And this is actually going to be our Ansible node. So we'll call this Ansible test. Drop this on local LVM. Get it spun up. I'll let this keep doing its thing here. So now that all three guests are spun up, the first one we're going to spin up to start this whole series is our Ansible test host. We're just going to quickly run through the Ansible config again. So we're going to get the rest of these spun up. I'll go back to Ansible test and we'll log in. If you recall, we'll want to install Ansible. So a quick apt-get install y Ansible. Another benefit to using LSCs is you can manage them from right within the Proxmox web UI. And technically you can do the same thing with virtual machines, but it's a console session rather than a terminal session, right? So with terminal sessions, you can do stuff like copy paste. So again, it helps with managing or getting services spun up way quicker versus like you having a console in or RDP in. I mean, you could SSH in and RDP in and they work just fine as well. And I do that for my Windows guests, but nothing like just a direct command line interface to the virtual machine. So now that we have all our guests spun up, the next part is for us to get our syslog server running. You only have to spin up the rsyslog server once. So we're not going to use Ansible to do that. In fact, that is going to be the manual portion of this install. So let's connect to the rsyslog server. Let's go ahead and do the logging in, clear our screen. To install rsyslog, we simply have to do apt-get install rsyslog. And there we go. We now have rsyslog installed. Now, after you get rsyslog installed, you'll then want to edit your rsyslog conf. So you can do that with rsyslog. You can do that with nano etc rsyslog.conf. And in order to enable logging, all you have to do is come down to this portion right here and uncomment these two modules or these two lines. So if you want to enable UDP logging, which is then you would uncomment the module line and uncomment the input line. After that, we save our work and then we do a quick systemctl rsyslog. So we have our syslog running, right? Now it's time to configure the Ansible portion. So the next thing you'll want to do is hop on to your log test server, and then you'll just want to get a quick IP address for log test. So we have log test right here. Let's see what IP we're working with. And it's 2127. Okay. All right. So you'll want to note that down somewhere. Then you'll want to hop back over to Ansible test. So we can verify Ansible is now installed by doing Ansible -dash version. There we go. Then we got to make a folder to hold our Ansible files. Then we're going to make a directory called rsyslog for this playbook. Once there, we'll do a host.yaml. Then we can touch the host.yaml file. Then we can enter our host.yaml file. Next thing you want to do is actually define the host.yaml, right? So remember, our IP address is 2.127. So if we wanted to find our host.yaml, we could start with a group called test group, and then we'll do hosts, and then we could just do 192.168.1.127. Cool. And in order to run Ansible, we're going to need our SSH key, so or at least be able to SSH into that other host. Cool. Now we should be able to at least SSH into that host before we do anything else. So we're going to do SSH root at 192.168.2.127. I also see another mistake I made there as well. Yep. So we're able to SSH in, right? And then we'll want to edit our host.yaml. So we have our syslog server configured. The next step is to log on to our Ansible host and double check our host file. And then we're going to create our playbook. So let's go ahead and power through this. I have some cloud stuff to learn. So we hop on over to the test server, do an ls, remove that old rsyslog playbook. We then do a tut rsyslog. Then of course we start with our 3 lines. We name the playbook. I'm going to call it install rsyslog. I'm going to call this restart rsyslog, because eventually we are going to have to restart rsyslog as part of this configuration process. Restart rsyslog. From there, we're going to call the service for our handler. So we're going to call the service module name rsyslog state restarted. There we go. After that, we have to define our tasks. So what we just did was define a new task called apt. And from apt, we're installing rsyslog. And then the state we want it to be is present. But we're not done. We have to define another task. So name this task configure rsyslog. And this is going to be very much like the video we created before. Right. Where we're going to call the line and file module. Then we define the path, which is /etc rsyslog.conf. Then we have to pass it the regex pattern that we're looking for. So we type in regex pattern. And you can get this regex pattern from online. Do a quick Google search, type in the pattern that you're looking for. In my case, I'm just using a config I've used before. So we'll do logs at okay, so we pass through our regex pattern, which is basically looking for slar at 192.168 dot. Notice how each dot or special character has a backspace to escape. 2 dot, and I believe this is 128. And then what we want to do is make sure there is a line in that file. And this is the line we're looking for. And then the last thing we want to do is notify. And what we want to do is call that handler we created earlier. So, and the handler we want to call is restart rsyslog. So let's clear this up. Let's make sure this is sane. We got a tags section. Let's make sure everything's where it should be. Notice I was off by 1 there, so now everything has to be moved by 1. And there we go. Okay, so now that our playbook is completed, we have it configured to send to our remote log server here. And it is basically looking for that exact same line, but this is a regex pattern to match this line. If it doesn't see this line, it'll add it to that file. And we can verify that by doing an Ansible playbook-i host.yaml-l test group. And then we'll pass our playbook, which is our syslog.playbook. And check this out. So it's already installed. It should have restarted our syslog. Right? So now, if we go onto our syslog server, we do an ls var log messages, or rather an ls var log, you'll see we still have our regular log files there. And so what happens when we do a tail-f var log syslog. So we're still getting messages from only this server. Oh, wait a second. Wait a second. Notice that we have messages from log test showing that the syslog server started. So that shows that our syslog server is working, right? That is a success. So now how do we run this playbook against all these Ansible nodes? Or how do we run this playbook against all these Proxmox hosts? Well, pretty straightforward. First, we add them to our host file. Let's hop back onto our Ansible control node. Now we do a nano hosts.yaml. And we'll define another group and we'll call this Proxmox hosts. And then we can just define our Proxmox host. And then we'll find our hosts as the following: 2.33. And of course, you could always use their DNS names to do this if you have that set up, but we don't for this test. So we put in all three of our Proxmox hosts. Next, we'll verify we can actually SSH into those Proxmox hosts. We'll do SSH root at 192.168.2.53. So now that we added those Proxmox hosts to our inventory file, deploying our syslog to our Proxmox host should be as simple as Ansible playbook -I host.yaml-l Proxmox for our Proxmox hosts, and then we do rsyslog playbook. And there you'll notice it's gathering facts. It found our Proxmox hosts. It's installing our syslog on each and every one of them. And notice, there it goes. It now should have all three of those sending their log messages to this server. And how can we validate that? Well, let's do an ls var log and see what we see there. Normal messages. What if we were to do a tail-f var log syslog, which is where all our log messages should be going? You'll notice we now have log messages from PVE test 2, PVE test, PVE test 3, even log test. And we just created a centralized logging service. Thank you for watching. And that's it, boys. That is how you configure logging on Proxmox using Ansible. That's as simple as it gets. It gets a bit more complicated. The video series will be changing. We're still going to be doing Proxmox series, but the videos will be a little bit more informal, a little less graphics, mostly because I feel like this gives me much more time to talk about the technology itself rather than trying to focus on visual effects. So this is a new format. I hope you enjoy it. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please hit the like button. If you have an opinion about it, please comment down below. If you would like to see more, please subscribe. Otherwise, see you around.